Welcome to The Explainer. I'm incredibly excited you're here today because we're unpacking one of the most bizarre, mind-bending historical anomalies I've ever come across. We're going to look at a moment in time when Great Britain completely erased 11 days from existence. Literally, wiped them right off the calendar. I know, it sounds impossible, but by the end of our time today, you're going to understand exactly how and why this happened, and I promise you'll see time itself in a completely different way.
So picture this for a second. Put yourself right in this scenario. What if you went to sleep on Wednesday, September 2nd, and when you woke up the very next morning, your calendar, your government, and literally everyone around you told you it was Thursday, September 14th? It sounds exactly like the plot of a science fiction movie, right? Like someone seriously messed with a time machine. But I assure you, this is an entirely true premise. It actually happened in 1752.
11. That is the sheer, shocking number of days that just vanished. Poof, gone, erased from history. Now look, this isn't just some abstract mathematical trivia to brush past. This was a massive geopolitical reality that suddenly and dramatically altered the lives of millions of people living in Great Britain and its colonies. Just imagine waking up and realizing almost 2 weeks of your life were entirely skipped over.
Because this temporal jump had severe, real-world consequences. Just think about the tangible stakes for a minute. If you were a merchant who lent money on September 1st, expecting a return in 2 weeks, well, the sudden jump meant your deadline arrived, but you effectively lost out on 11 days of accrued interest. Or what if you were a day laborer? You literally just lost 11 days of potential wages. And if you were a tenant paying by the month, your month just got 11 days shorter. But guess what? Your landlord still wanted the full payment. Honestly, ask yourself, how would you feel if your money or your earning time just vanished overnight?
Naturally, you'd expect people to be absolutely furious. And for a really long time, the legend was that angry mobs took to the streets across Britain, rioting and chanting, "Give us our 11 days." It paints an incredible picture of civil unrest, doesn't it? But here is the fascinating twist. Historians today actually believe these legendary protests were mostly a myth. They likely stemmed from a satirical painting created years later. It turns out the British public accepted this massive temporal displacement with remarkable stoicism. So, if there were no riots, and people generally just accepted it, why on earth did the government do this in the first place? Well, let's investigate.
Let's dive into our first section here, Caesar's mistake and the 11-minute glitch.
To really understand why Britain had to erase 11 days, we have to rewind the clock roughly 2,000 years back, to ancient Rome, specifically to Julius Caesar and the creation of the Julian calendar in 46 BC. You see, the Roman calendar before Caesar was totally out of sync with the seasons, so he instituted a brand new system, 365 days a year, with a leap year adding an extra day every 4 years. Now, Caesar's math was absolutely brilliant for its time, but it had one fatal flaw: exactly 11 minutes. The Earth actually takes 365.2422 days to orbit the Sun, which meant Caesar's calendar was estimating just a tiny bit too high. His year was exactly 11 minutes longer than the actual solar year. And honestly, 11 minutes seems completely harmless, doesn't it?
But the thing is, those 11 minutes compound over time. In 46 BC, it was just a tiny glitch. But after 128 years, the Julian calendar had drifted an entire full day behind the actual solar seasons. Fast forward over 1,600 years to the 1500s, and that seemingly harmless 11-minute error had snowballed into a massive 10-day temporal crisis.
And this growing crisis brings us to our next major phase, the Pope's fix and deleting days to save Easter. By 1582, this drifting calendar was a glaring problem, and Pope Gregory XIII decided he had to intervene, bringing together the absolute greatest astronomers and mathematicians of the age. Now, why did the Pope care so deeply about this? Because the calendar drift was completely messing with the Catholic Church's most important holiday. Easter's date, you see, is calculated based on the spring equinox. But because the written calendar was 10 days out of sync with the sun, the equinox was happening earlier and earlier on paper. If they just left it unchecked, Easter was eventually going to drift all the way into the middle of summer, completely severing Christianity's holiest day from its natural seasonal timing.
So the Pope's mathematical team came up with this incredibly elegant solution, which we now know as the Gregorian calendar. I actually want to walk you through these steps because the math here is just beautiful. Step 1. You keep Caesar's rule. Leap years happen every year divisible by 4. Simple enough. But to fix that 11-minute overestimation, we add step 2, skip the leap year if the year is divisible by 100. So years like 1700, 1800, 1900, no leap year. But wait, actually scratch that. Doing that overcorrects it slightly, so we add step 3, put the leap year back in if the year is also divisible by 400. That's exactly why the year 2000 was a leap year. This refined rule is so remarkably precise that it keeps our calendar accurate to within a single day every 3,030 years.
But look, fixing the future leap years didn't solve their immediate problem. They were already 10 days out of sync right there in 1582. So Pope Gregory's immediate solution was simple but highly controversial. He just reset the clock. He mandated the outright deletion of 10 days in October 1582. Catholic Europe literally went to sleep on October 4th and woke up on October 15th. Problem solved, right? Well, not quite. Because while the math was certainly fixed, this sudden change created an absolutely enormous geopolitical headache.
Which leads us directly into a period of temporal chaos, with two completely different timelines operating in Europe.
You have to remember the context here. 1582 was right in the thick of the Protestant Reformation. Europe was deeply and violently divided along religious lines. So when the Pope announced his brilliant new mathematical calendar, the Protestant half of Europe looked at it and absolutely refused to adopt it. They saw it purely as a Catholic overreach. Just look at the sheer absurdity this caused. You literally had bordering countries living in two completely different timelines. If you were sitting in Catholic France, you'd look at your calendar and see October 15th. But right across the water in Protestant England, it was only October 5th. In the exact same moment in time, two neighboring nations were 10 full days apart. I actually love this quote because it so perfectly encapsulates the intense stubbornness of the era. German Protestants reportedly declared, "I would rather disagree with the sun than agree with the Pope." It is fascinating to see how deep these geopolitical standoffs can run. They literally chose to live with a mathematically broken calendar rather than accept a perfectly logical fix from a religious rival. And the practical result of all this stubbornness? Complete and utter chaos. Just look at the trade nightmares this generated. Imagine being a merchant trying to negotiate a basic shipping contract across Europe. If a legal document said goods were due on the 10th of October, you immediately had to ask, wait, do you mean the Catholic 10th or the Protestant 10th? Travelers crossing European borders were quite literally time traveling, jumping forward or backward 10 days just by taking a single step. And this temporal Cold War didn't just last a few years. Europe lived like this for over 170 years.
Finally, we reach our climax, the Calendar Act of 1752, where Britain officially surrenders to mathematics. By 1752, the headache had just become too massive to ignore. Global trade networks were expanding rapidly, and Britain finally gave in to the math. Parliament passed the Calendar Act, but because another 170 years had passed since the Pope's initial fix, the calendar had drifted even further. They didn't just need to erase 10 days anymore, they now had to erase a full 11 days to catch up to the rest of Europe. And remember those terrible stakes we talked about earlier? The lost wages and the interest? Well, Britain had spent 170 years watching other countries navigate this chaos, so they actually learned from it. Parliament meticulously mandated that rents and wages be prorated, interest on loans was legally adjusted, and contracts were formally rewritten to account for the missing time. They planned so carefully that it actually explains why the transition was mostly peaceful and why those legendary riots we mentioned probably never happened at all. And here is a brilliantly quirky modern-day echo of that exact pragmatic planning. To avoid losing out on a full year's worth of tax revenue, the British government straight up refused to shorten their fiscal year. The old tax year used to start on April 1st. When they deleted the 11 days, they simply shifted the end of the tax year forward to make up the difference. Add some other minor historical calendar tweaks over the centuries, and today, the modern UK tax year famously starts on April 6th. The British tax system is still permanently offset by the ghosts of those missing days from 1752. This sudden shift also created absolutely fascinating historical quirks for anyone living through it. Take George Washington, for example, the first U.S. president. Was he born on February 11, 1731, or February 22, 1732? The answer is, well, kind of both, because the British Empire, which obviously included the American colonies at the time, shifted the calendar and also officially changed the start of the new year. People who lived through 1752 often have two completely different recorded birth dates, their old-style date and their new-style Gregorian date. So, I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to chew on. We tend to look at our calendars and our clocks as absolute, unbreakable rules of the universe. But the mystery of 1752 proves otherwise, doesn't it?
Is time a fixed law of nature, or is it really just a human invention, a system we agree upon, negotiate, sometimes get wrong by 11 minutes, and occasionally fiercely contest? Those 11 days never truly existed, yet they fundamentally changed history and remain hidden right there on your modern calendar. Thank you so much for exploring this temporal mystery with me today.